Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and other leftist groups are working aggressively to bring political and cultural change to America. Can they be stopped? Who is funding this effort to transform the United States into the socialist states of America? The D. James Kennedy Ministry is raising awareness with a new documentary, Billionaire Radical, George Soros and the Scheme to Remake America. Here to tell us about it is D. James Kennedy Ministry President and CEO, Dr. Frank Wright. Dr. Wright, it's a pleasure to have you with us. So many of us know about George Soros, but fill us in for those who don't know about him. Who is he? What is he trying to do to America?
Well, George Soros is a name that most people recognize, but don't put all the pieces together or connect the dots, you might say. He reminds me of Winston Churchill's comment about Russia. Churchill said of Russia that it was a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. And that's not a half bad description of George Soros. First of all, he's Jewish by birth, but he denies God and he absolutely hates Israel. And yet he's very quick to call his critics anti-Semitic because of his Jewish DNA. But according to U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, Soros has done more to vilify the state of Israel and to fund anti-Israel propaganda and machines than almost any other person on the face of the earth. So here's a Jew who can't stand Israel and is doing everything he can to undermine it. In addition, Soros is a wealthy man. He became fabulously wealthy from the free enterprise system, and yet it's his desire to make the rest of us live under Marxist socialism, or let's call it what it is, under communism. He fled communism in Hungary as a youth at the end of World War II, but wants the rest of us to live under it. Third, the piece about Soros that most people don't know, I think the scariest piece in many respects, is that he considers himself, and he calls himself an atheist. He says God was invented by man of necessity of some kind, but then he calls himself God, a God with a lowercase g. He said, I fancied myself some kind of God, and if truth be known, I had certain rather potent messianic fantasies as a young man. And he went on to say, it's a sort of disease when you consider yourself some kind of God, the creator of everything, but I feel comfortable about it now since I have begun to live it out. This is the thinking of George Soros, that he is orchestrating and is the architect of kind of a new world order. In fact, Soros said about himself that his personal goal was to become the conscience of the world. Now, Gary, this is a man with a lofty self-regard, wouldn't you say?
Yes. So is he only after money, or is he really interested in creating this new world order?
No, he's made more money than he could ever spend. It's estimated he's already given $32 billion of his fortune away, and yet he still resides, I think, on 160 or 162 of the most wealthy people in the world on the Forbes magazine list. Fabulously wealthy, made all of that under the free enterprise system. Yet he's given a ton of it away, $20 billion alone, to his Open Society Foundation, which he created, he said, to help fulfill his personal values. And you might be interested in what some of those values are. They are abortion, LGBTQ activism, open borders, euthanasia, legalized prostitution, anti-Second Amendment, of course, in favor of defunding the police, and what he calls judicial reform. Now, when Soros says he's in favor of judicial reform, he's talking about buying prosecutors by giving millions of dollars to their election campaigns. And when I say prosecutors, I mean hard left progressive prosecutors. Just 3 cities as examples with over $1 million, in some cases close to $2 million election contributions given: Philadelphia, Chicago, Los Angeles. All 3 of those cities have radical left-wing prosecutors who oftentimes require little or no bail, choose not to prosecute crimes at all. And Gary, you might remember the incident in St. Louis, Missouri, where the McCloskey couple were standing outside their home with firearms to defend their property against rioters and that had broken into their gated community. And it was a prosecutor in St. Louis who swooped in and filed charges against the rioters. No way. Against the McCloskeys for some kind of illegal use of a firearm. Those charges were later dropped. But this is the way George Soros is engaging the judicial system of America and trying to undermine the rule of law.
So is there evidence that he's actually funding Antifa and BLM?
Antifa is a little tougher to track down. It wasn't wrong when former Vice President Biden said it's more of an idea than it is a clearly articulated organization. But the short answer to your question is yes. He has funded Black Lives Matter, Antifa. He has funded just about every hard left organization in America. In fact, so much so that we have developed what we call the follow the money chart, which shows the flow of money from George Soros and other like-minded, extremely liberal foundations into the coffers of everything from the Southern Poverty Law Center, Black Lives Matter, you name it, any hard left organization, Soros is the money man for that. Now, all the money doesn't come from him, but if you see George Soros's foundation make a contribution, the Ford Foundation, the McKnight Foundation, all the rest of them are going to follow suit right behind. So he leads the liberal foundation world around by the nose and clearly funds all these organizations. Now, Gary, we did very, very careful research to document all this. We did not do an expose on George Soros taking that lightly. He's quick to sue. He's quick to trying to cut off your sources of support, advertising and others. Well, we're a nonprofit organization, but he's also linked to some nefarious people. And so we documented everything that appears in our 60-minute special, Billionaire Radical, George Soros and his scheme to remake America.
Up next, more with Frank Wright, who sets it straight on how some Christian groups are receiving money from billionaire George Soros.